We think business is not so much about what you do, but why you do it. And this is why we do what we do. We are passionate about making sure that manufacturers are as efficient, sustainable, and profitable as they possibly can be. And everything that we do comes back to that. So collaborating with Google in this way is terrific for us because we think that leads straight back to that particular statement. We work very closely with a number of charities in the area, including particularly the Arkwright Trust, who sponsor very, very talented A-level students and try and encourage them to stay within engineering and manufacturing. And we support them in that particular activity, and work very closely with a lot of the major trade associations and interested parties in the sector. So you'll recognise things like Technology Strategy Board, EEF, and PERA as examples of big organisations in the manufacturing and engineering sector who have good things to say, do lots of good work. We support them and try and help them with their activities. I thought I'd give you a few stats just to get you thinking. UK is the 11th largest manufacturing economy in the world, represents something like 10% of GDP. That's something the politicians will tell you regularly, and it's absolute rubbish. And I'll come on to tell you why in a second. Something like half of UK exports are a result of manufacturing. Employs 2.6 million people. That's massively understated. 72% of UK R&D spend comes from manufacturing. And something you probably don't know, not widely known fact, is that salaries, wages within the sector are something like 15% higher than the national average. This is kind of how manufacturing is normally portrayed, dragging behind financial services, and I'll tell you why that's changing, or indeed is totally wrong. Does anybody know who this chap is? Does anyone recognise that person? His name's Simon Kuznets, and Simon won a Nobel Prize for inventing GDP. He kind of devised GDP. And having invented it and devised it and worked out how to use it, he completely disowned it. He disowned it because it's such a poor measure of the value of what happens within a particular economy. As an example of how bad it can be, if I was to walk out of here and commit a crime, that would lead to an increase in GDP. Likewise, the Fukushima nuclear disaster caused a huge uplift in GDP in Japan. So it's a very flawed measure. Now what we do is we take that very flawed measure of national output, national good, national progress, and ally it to something else which is equally flawed, called the Standard Industrial Classification, which was invented about 1927 as a way of trying to classify particular industries and where activity was occurring. What happens if you put those two measures together is you end up with a graph something like this. And this is the classic graph which manufacturers have had to live with for the last probably 50 years, but certainly the last 30 years, showing a decline. So we've got the situation when in 1981, something like 23% of UK GDP was represented by manufacturing. Down now to 2010, where we've just had a little uplift, which is lovely, but something like 13%. What this sort of graph doesn't take into account is that in 1981, and if you go back still further, the vast majority of the catering, security, cleaning, etc. that happened in that particular manufacturing plant in 1981 or in 1960 was registered as manufacturing GDP. Come down here, and we've outsourced to Initial, to Compass, to Securicor, to DHL for logistics. And every single piece of that now registers as services. So the growth in the services sector is massively understated in respect of this, and the situation with manufacturing is massively understated. And unfortunately, that's the graph that children see, it's the graph that politicians see, and it's the graph that financiers see. And that has huge implications for the sector, so it's something we need to change, and we should all be aware of. Engineering UK have reproduced some figures. They've managed to get it up to about 20%. I think it's probably nearer 25–30% of UK GDP comes from manufacturing. Today I'm going to talk about manufacturing trends and some of the things that we're seeing in terms of the trends in manufacturing. But I want to just, if there is one message I want to leave you with, and there's a lot of information here, but the one thing is innovate. Be innovative. It is the way forward. It's what we need to do. It's what all manufacturing businesses need to be thinking about. So that's the main message from this. If it gets lost in all the other stuff, make sure you take that away with you. It's about being innovative. So this is the journey I'm going to take you on. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we'll start with the past, just to put it in a bit of context. Move forward to the trends, where we are roughly around now. Try and look to 2020, and then take a further leap forward and just see what things might be like going forward a little bit further. So this is how manufacturing used to happen in the past. This is the classic historic product life cycle. So we used to mass produce things. You can have any color as long as it's white. Lots and lots of aircraft being made there. And look, we can even make paintings, mass-produced paintings. Absolutely fantastic. Why could we do that? Well, basically because we had a situation where we had cheap, undemanding, almost limitless supplies of labor, very, very plentiful, cheap energy, and it was guilt-free energy in those days. And of course, raw materials were relatively easy to come by. What we would then do is produce these products. Whether the customer wanted them or not was largely irrelevant. We would produce them en masse. We would then use enormous amounts of time and resources and energy and capital in shipping and storing that material, whatever it was we produced, whether the customer wanted it or not. And because we didn't know whether the customer wanted it or not, we had to persuade them they wanted it. So we would spend millions and millions and millions of pounds and effort trying to sell them what we had then produced, which was great. And that was a good model for years and years. Ultimately, however, every single thing we produced ended up in landfill at some point. So the model wasn't great. So the model must be something we can improve on. Here are some of the trends that we're recognizing in the sector. These are not necessarily opportunities or challenges. They're just things that are happening and that we need to be aware of. In the future, there will only be sustainable manufacturing. We need to improve efficiency. Going back to the previous slides, when we were thinking about mass production, it was all about tack time, lean, continuous improvement, OEE, things like that. Those were the things we were focused on, very focused on the production part of the process. And I'll come on to talk about that a little bit later. We've got a massive labour market and skills gap, but I think we're approaching that in the wrong way. Massive energy issues in the UK in particular, both in terms of the cost and security. Big supply chain issues. Fukushima, another example of where the integrity and the robustness of supply chains was really challenged. We've got a big export opportunity in the UK, and we're really grasping that well at the moment. UKTI doing a terrific job, and there's lots more we can do. And servitization, which I'll come on to speak about. I want to just focus on three key parts here. These are the current trends, really. So we're getting mass customization. We're getting something called reshoring. EEF are picking up on this in quite a big way. And we're getting this increasing input costs, and this is an important one. So just to cover those in a little more detail, you can have any type of Land Rover that you want now. You can pretty much customize it. I was around the plant recently, and pretty much every car, every vehicle going through had a label on it. It was already pre-ordered and being made to exact specifications for a particular buyer, even to the country and everything. It was very impressive. What you've got now going on is, instead of the factory producing a product, one-way communication, you've now got two-way communication. So there's a dialogue between the customer and the plant. That's where mass customization is coming in. Reshoring is beginning to happen. That arbitrage that we were able to effect between wages in the West and wages in the eastern seaboard or western seaboard of China is becoming much less effective. Wage rises there are huge, and we're beginning to see the effect of automation and other influences making reshoring a real possibility. There's something like a net 7% gain in terms of reshoring. So the little ship disappearing into the distance is 4% that we're still losing, but we're getting something like 11% coming back. Those figures are probably 2 years old now, and actually the trend seems to be increasing. So it's a good, solid trend there. I don't think we recognise the value of that brand in terms of reshoring and also our export capabilities. So using Made in UK, it's incredibly powerful in the East and the Middle East, massively powerful to have a UK label, made in the UK label on. Most of the coal mines in China use sealed electric pumps which are produced in Wakefield or just outside Leeds. And it's not a known thing, and they can produce them. They've re-engineered them in China, but the Chinese buyers won't buy the Chinese version. They want the UK version, so it's terrific. It's just the sort of thing we want. We've got UK energy costs only going one way, despite what Miliband is trying. We're getting a situation where we're running out of certain rare earth materials, but just generally speaking, raw materials are becoming more difficult to extract, more expensive to extract. And we've got an ever-demanding labour force, no matter where you are in the world, health and safety issues, quite rightly, and all sorts of other issues relating to work-life balance. So what we've got from where we were previously is virtually a complete reversal. We've now got expensive energy, expensive raw materials, and a limited and highly expensive labour force. So those are the sorts of trends which are driving the way manufacturers are thinking for the future, or need to be. Jump forward to 2020, we're going to see massive increase in the uptake of very sophisticated automation and robotics, huge implications in terms of 3D printing and additive manufacturing. And I'm going to talk very briefly, I know it was covered earlier, but about the Internet of Things and Industry 4.0. So go to robotics. Let's see if we can get the video to play. This is a fantastic piece of putting two bits of technology together. So what we've got here is a robot arm with a 3D printer on the end of it. It just shows the power of what could be done with this sort of technology. It's the flexibility. What I'd like to point out is the zero waste. And I'll tell you why that's quite so important for various industries in 1 second. You can see this is a CAD drawing in the background. Please produce this for me. So as you can see, that's an amazingly powerful way to combine these two technologies. So this is aircraft manufacturing, fantastically sophisticated, what the government would call advanced manufacturing. I'm never quite sure what isn't advanced manufacturing these days. But something like, if I was to give you 12 grams of aluminium and put it into the aircraft manufacturing process, about 1 gram, 1/12 would end up on the plane. The rest of it would be wasted. Now they do recycle it, it's not exactly wasted, but the point is if we can get additive manufacturing to work, it makes an enormous difference to the way that manufacturing can operate in the future. So let's jump a little bit further forward. This is me. This is what I intend to be doing in the future. This is me at 150 years old. Don't I look good? So this is the Internet of Things, which we have touched on in the past. But I've got just a little definition. If you forgive me, I'm just going to read this out. It's an ecosystem of technologies monitoring the status of physical objects, capturing meaningful data, and communicating that information through IP networks to software applications. It's accurate, automated, and real-time information. It's fantastically powerful. We're already beginning to see it with regards to things like Nest and the way that devices can speak to you and speak to each other. In terms of manufacturing, it relates in many ways to something that the Germans are very keen to push and is very, very important for us, I think. And this is something that they're calling Industry 4.0. It's kind of the Internet of Things for manufacturing itself. It's about machine-to-machine communication. It's about the product talking to the robot or talking to the machine that's using the product. And it's about embedded sensors throughout the process. They're comparing it to kind of the fourth version of the Industrial Revolution. And I appreciate you won't be able to read the graph necessarily, but that's what this is all about. And it is an incredibly powerful potential for the future and something that we need to react to and be aware of and facilitate the uptake of this within our factories would make an enormous difference. Jumping forward to two further things I'd like to cover really. The first one is something called the Foresight Report. You should have copies on most of the chairs around the room. This is a fantastic piece of work done by UK government or initiated by UK government. And I'll talk a little bit about what they've been talking about. And the next thing I'd like to pick up, again, poor old McKinsey's get mentioned a lot today, don't they? But they have done some terrific work in manufacturing recently. And their particular trend is something called nearshoring, which I think goes way beyond reshoring. So I'll talk briefly about that. So this is, hopefully you'll be able to read this. This is kind of from the Foresight report. And if you remember when we talked about the historic product lifecycle, what manufacturing used to be like, it focused on production, circle number 3 on that box. Now, manufacturers are thinking about the whole value chain and how they can extract value all the way through that chain and add value for the customer all the way through the train. Now, what you'll notice there is going back each time from whichever part of that particular value chain you are, you're going back to the R&D department. That's communication and dialogue saying, we need to dispose of this product better. How do I get rid of this product? My after-sales service isn't good. I'm using it in a different way. I'm consuming it in a different way to what you intended. And we've also got the 4 Res there, and I'll make sure I get them right. So we are talking there about recycling, reuse, so reusing the same materials, recovery, making sure that we recover all the more materials, all the parts that we're using, and remanufacturing. And this is a very, very important part of future manufacturing processes. We've taken that excellent work that's been done by the Foresight report and changed it slightly because we feel the emphasis on R&D is even stronger. So we have R&D right at the middle of this. And what we're talking about here is supplier ecosystem. So this goes back to the sort of Fukushima type example where, and floods in Vietnam is another example, where having a really robust, agile, intelligent, innovation-led supplier ecosystem makes a world of difference for future manufacturing. Focus on production, yes, but not in as much detail as perhaps we used to, or certainly not to the detriment of other parts of the value chain. And consumption, again, speaking back to the R&D department through disposal and consumption process, so that actually the R&D, the innovative departments, the innovation within manufacturing sits right at the center of the value chain. I'll just talk very briefly now about nearshoring. This is McKinsey's latest development in manufacturing. I've put EEF there. EEF are very, very vocal and strong on reshoring, and that's about bringing this arbitrage, wage arbitrage, and bringing manufacturing back to the UK. Well, McKinsey's, I think, have gone one step further. They're looking a little further into the future. But what McKinsey's are saying is that the location of a manufacturing facility, where the manufacturing will happen, and we talked about this slightly earlier with artisan manufacturing, is much more related now to the proximity to market and to the proximity to sources of innovation. So in the UK, we've got something like the 5th, 6th largest economy in the world. So we've got a fantastic opportunity in terms of our proximity to market. But we've also got fantastic sources of innovation. The picture there is the Manufacturing Technology Centre at Anstey Park, one of 7 high-value manufacturing catapults in the UK. And we've also got a fantastic university network which collaborates in a much better way going forward than it ever has done in the past with industry. The little graph there shows you the US is the far right with 60 or 70% of the top 100 universities, but we're right up there, 11 or 12, miles ahead of anybody else. So in terms of the future for UK manufacturing, we've got a fantastic economy, 6th, 7th largest in the world. Ally that to fantastic sources of innovation through the technologies, the manufacturing technology centres, the high-value catapult centres, and our brilliant universities, should all mean that UK manufacturing has a great future. Thank you.